We want to welcome everyone to Dr. Elias's presentation on Cyprus. This is something that's very much needed for all of us to understand more about what is going on. And we're very thankful and honored that we have Dr. Elias to make this presentation for our metropolis. So we'd like to, we're always very blessed to have His Eminence join in and be a part of it. So can you start us off, Your Eminence, with the prayer?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen.
Amen.
Βασιλεύ ουράνιε, παράκλητε, το πνεύμα της αληθείας, ο πάντα χου παρών και τα πάντα πληρών. Ο θησαυρός των αγαθών και ζωής χορηγός, ελθέ και σκήνωσον εν ημίν και καθάρισον ημάς, από πάσης κυλίδος και σώσον αγαθέ τας ψυχάς ημών. Amen. Heavenly King and Comforter, the Spirit of truth, everywhere present and filling all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us of all impurity, and of your goodness save our souls. Amen. And I wanted to add my expression from the top of gratitude to you, Professor Elias, for this your third presentation to us. Is that not it, right?
Yep.
Yes. And I very much look forward to it. I've enjoyed the past two, and we are recording this one, so it will be up for a wider distribution as soon as we finish. But because more people deserve to hear you than the handful of us that are present here now, but through the convenience of YouTube, they can watch it at any time. So welcome to you, and I don't want to take any more of your time.
Thank you
Who
so
will be
much.
introducing you? Maria, are you, or Father Michael?
Maria, Mrs. Tamolos.
Okay.
For those of you that don't know, Dr. Elias Petrou, he's an assistant professor. He's head of the classical studies, medieval studies, and modern Greek studies at the library, the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And he's a top researcher. He has researched on Mount Athos. He has researched at the Vatican. He is, and more than that, he is one of the hard-working, sincerest persons that I've ever worked with. And I am very honored that he has accepted to do these historical presentations just for our metropolis. So,
Dear Maria, I mean, probably you don't see it because of my dark skin, of my black beard, but I'm blushing. Thank you so much for this introduction. Although I want to be humbled, it is not needed. Your Eminence, dear priests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is great honor and a pleasure to be here with you today, continuing the important tradition of the Greek Orthodox Metropolis of Pittsburgh, the annual lecture dedicated to aspects of Greek history. Today we proceed with part 2, since last year we did part 1, about our lecture, An Island Divided, Cyprus from 1974 to the present. First, before moving to the main course, allow me to express my sincere gratitude to His Eminence Metropolitan Savas for his unwavering support and for promoting initiatives such as these, which are vital for the flourishing of Greek communities far from our homeland. I would also like to warmly thank Maria Stamolis and Father Michael from the Ministry of Greek Education for their excellent work in organizing today's event. Thank you for the bottom of my heart. So, as the philosopher George Santayana reminded us in the early 20th century, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It is therefore our duty not only to remember, but also to teach future generations about our history and the mistakes of the past, so that they may not be repeated. By doing so, we also nurture the hope that old wounds will eventually heal, and that we may move forward together towards a more peaceful and promising future. Today, as I mentioned, we will revisit the recent past to examine what truly happened on the small island of Cyprus 51 years ago in 1974 and afterwards, to understand how we arrived at the situation we face today and to explore possible paths forward. And I'm confident that our discussion following this presentation will be both insightful and constructive. I have to say that being born and raised on the island of Cyprus, this topic is very close to my heart, and it makes me move and too many emotions. However, today I'm going to wear the hat of the historian and present the facts. I want to show you what actually happened and why we have this situation today. And I'm not here to point any fingers to blame entities or people, but I'm sure that by the end of this presentation, you understand why we are here and what hopefully will happen in the future. Last year, in part one, we journeyed through the long history of Cyprus, from prehistoric times to the mid-20th century and the island's independence, touching upon the tragic events of 1974. We saw that throughout the centuries, Cyprus has often been a pawn in the political games of empires, kingdoms, and states, with its people continually changing rulers, from the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt to the Romans, from Byzantium to the Arabs, from the Crusaders to the Franks, and from the Venetians to the Ottomans, and finally to the British Empire. Cyprus has always occupied a crucial geopolitical position, standing at the crossroads between East and the West, the Middle East and Europe. In fact, in 1964, the Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev famously described the island as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. The strategic importance, however, has often been a source of suffering. Repeated invasions, occupations, and hardships have marked the island's long history. Yet, despite these trials, the Cypriot people endured, preserving their Greek identity, language, and faith throughout the centuries. The most recent and tragic of these ordeals was the Turkish invasion of the summer of 1974, which created a political and territorial division that endures to this day, leaving deep scars and ongoing pain for the island's people. But to truly understand not only the current political, cultural, and social situation in Cyprus, but also how these circumstances evolved after 1974, we must go back even further to the founding of the Republic of Cyprus and examine how the actions of specific players helped shape a dysfunctional situation that continues to affect the island. Although we touched upon some of these events in our previous lectures, it is important to refresh our historical memory and introduce additional details about how Cyprus became an independent state under unusual circumstances. Let me use some numbers. In 1955, Cyprus was still a British colony, one of the United Kingdom's last holdings near the Middle East. The population at the time was roughly 550,000 to 570,000, of whom approximately 80% were Greek Cypriots, 18% were Turkish Cypriots, and the remaining 2% belonged to smaller minorities, including Maronites, Armenians, Latins, etc. It is important and I want to state that from the beginning, to note that during this period, and I'm meaning before the independence of the Republic of Cyprus, people did not primarily identify themselves by nation or ethnicity, Greek Cypriots meaning or Turkish Cypriots, but rather by religion, as Christian Cypriots or Muslim Cypriots or Latin Cypriots and so on. Why does this matter? Because at that time, all the residents were considered simply as Cypriots. There were no formal or informal cues that might invite external powers to intervene in the island's internal affairs, a factor that will later have profound consequences for Cyprus history. Nevertheless, since the overwhelming majority of Cypriots were Greek Orthodox and shared a continuous history of more than 2,000 years with the Greek mainland, unlike the Muslim Cypriots, which we have to state, who were either immigrants that came to the island after the 16th century or converted Christians seeking to avoid taxation, the connection to the Greek culture, language, and ideas was always strong. Even before the formation of the modern Greek state in 1830s, wherever Greek subjects of the Ottoman Empire, the known Rayades, rebelled against Ottoman authorities, Cypriots often launched their own uprisings, although with limited success. Let us not forget, for example, the torture and execution of Archbishop Kyprianos on July 9, 1821, by the Ottoman authorities following his role in a failed rebellion inspired by the Greek Revolution. This sentiment did not waver even after Cyprus came under British control in 1878. During the 82 years of British rule, Cypriots repeatedly attempted to revolt in pursuit of enosis, of union with Greece. One notable example is the events of October 1931, when Cypriots set fire to the British governor's residence in the capital on October 21st. The British Army responded with gunfire, killing at least 17 people and arresting leaders of both church and political community. Earlier, we have to remember that during World War I, the United Kingdom even offered Cyprus to Greece on the condition that Greece joined the Allied forces against Germany, an offer that Greece ultimately rejected. Everything changed in the mid-20th century with the global wave of anti-colonial movements. Cyprus saw a potential path to union with Greece under the leadership of Archbishop Makarios III. In last year's lecture, we examined in detail the Cypriot Revolution from 1955 to 1959, organized by EOKA, Ethniική Οργάνωση Κυπρίων Αγωνιστών, National Organization of Cypriot Fighters, against British authorities, and how young Cypriots sacrificed their lives for the enosis. While the primary goal was initially the enosis, the struggle ultimately evolved into the independence of Cyprus and the establishment of the Republic of Cyprus. However, during last year, we did not discuss how external factors during that period planted the seeds of many of the island's contemporary problems. The British, like in other colonies, realized that they could no longer maintain full control over their overseas territories, but they were not willing to relinquish influence entirely. So they followed a divide and conquer strategy, as they had done, for example, in India and Pakistan and other areas. They created divisions in Cyprus and then positioned themselves as arbiters. Earlier, we noted that Cypriots identified themselves by religion, Christians, Muslims, and so on, rather by nationality. British policy was the first to introduce ethnic labels such as Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot, effectively inviting external powers to intervene in Cypriot affairs. In fact, just 1 year after the Cypriot Revolution began in 1955, although the uprising was orchestrated and fought primarily by Greek Cypriots, and we mentioned for the enosis with Greek mainland, the British invited both Greece and Turkey to discuss the Eastern Mediterranean and Cyprus problem in London without any participation from Cypriots themselves. These discussions, which extended from August 29, 1955 into 1956, elevated Turkey's role in the island's internal affairs. It was akin to invite, let's say, the parents of two naughty children to take responsibility for them. This was also the first time the concept that we're going to use many times during this presentation, guarantor powers, was introduced, which later became formalized in 1959 during the negotiations for the establishment of the Republic of Cyprus. As we will see further down, if we can consider that the whole experiment of the Republic of Cyprus was staged and was almost from the beginning doomed to fail. You will see what I mean further down. The Republic of Cyprus was officially established on October 1st, 1960, under circumstances that already hinted future problems. Discussions regarding the island's independence took place on two main levels. The first focused on the internal governance of the new state and how its communities will coexist. For example, the presidency was reserved for a Greek Cypriot, while the vice presidency was reserved for a Turkish Cypriot. However, the vice president was granted veto powers that could override the president's decisions and vice versa. Even though the population was still roughly 80% Greek Cypriots and 18% Turkish Cypriots. So it's going to 50-50 now. Similarly, in parliament, 35 of the 50 seats were allocated to Greek Cypriots and 15 to Turkish Cypriots, reflecting a 70-30% distribution rather than the actual 80-18% ratio. These structural imbalances were already problematic from the beginning. Even more concerning was the second level of negotiation, which dealt with the role of the, what we mentioned, guarantor powers. This table of the guarantor powers included the United Kingdom, Greece, and Turkey. No Cypriot representatives were present. Under the resulting agreements, these three powers had the right to intervene in Cyprus' internal affairs, either collectively or individually, to protect the country's independence, constitution, and territorial integrity. From the outset, the Republic of Cyprus was a fragile experiment, with numerous ambiguities in its governance almost guaranteeing potential intervention. Geopolitical factors further complicated matters. For example, Greece was nearly 500 miles away geographically, while Turkey is still only 47 miles from the island, making intervention much easier for Turkey, for example. Nevertheless, despite these peculiar circumstances, the Republic of Cyprus was established through the Zurich and London agreements, and Archbishop Makarios III was elected as the first president, while Dr. Fazil Küçük became the first vice president. You can see him at the right. The new state adopted three official languages that actually still exist in the constitution of the Republic of Cyprus: Greek, Turkish, and English. That's why the Greek, for example, the Cypriot IDs and passports have three languages on them. Its national flag, designed by a Turkish Cypriot artist, depicts the island in yellow on a white background above two olive branches, deliberately avoiding the colors red and blue to prevent associations with Turkey or Greece. The agreements also allowed Greece and Turkey to maintain limited military forces on the island. Greece stationed 950 soldiers, known as Eldik, Hellenic force in Cyprus, while Turkey stationed 650 troops, known as Turdik, Turkish force in Cyprus. And actually their camps were next to each other in Nicosia. This unique arrangement created an independent state that paradoxically was not fully independent. Even the United Nations had to draft provisions to recognize and legitimize its weird existence. Tensions between the two communities surfaced almost immediately, long before the ink on the Declaration of Independence had dried. In fact, the Republic of Cyprus experienced only 3 years of relative peace before tensions began to escalate in early 1963. The dysfunctional constitution, deep-rooted differences between the two communities, and increasing external pressures soon led to violent clashes across the island. In some instances, in fact, especially in 1963, Turkey intervened by sending fighter jets and bombing areas in the north part of the island. We're talking now 11 years before the invasion. Witnessing the growing instability, President Makarios attempted to amend 13 articles of the Constitution, which some of them were about the vice president and the veto areas, but his efforts were unsuccessful. By 1964, the Turkish Cypriot population had begun to form enclaves, as we call them pockets, tilakes, in different parts of the island, self-administrated and defended by armed Turkish Cypriot forces that no longer recognize the authority of the Republic. What you see there with purple, blue color are actually the pockets that were created by the Turkish Cypriots, and they created their own ruled areas. They didn't recognize the Republic of Cyprus. They were just having their own laws. They had border lines you couldn't cross, and you can imagine the confusion that was happening on the island. The red color, what you see there, is something which still exists. The British bases. The Britain are always there to take care of everyone. So, from 1964, yes, in response to this escalating violence, what we say with the pockets, the United Nations established in 1963 the peacekeeping force for the first time in Cyprus, the well-known as UNFICYP, the United Nations peacekeeping force in Cyprus that still exists, is consisted mainly by Canadians and New Zealanders. Around the same time, something we didn't mention the last time, former US Secretary of State Dean Acheson proposed a plan for the island's division, and this came from the file of Cyprus that was released probably 5 or 6 years ago. His proposals, these are the CIA documents, envisioned the southern part joining Greece, while Turkish Cypriots will relocate to the north, where Turkey will maintain a military base. Although the plan was ultimately rejected by all parties, it revealed that the events of 1974, 11 years later, were neither unexpected nor unprecedented. From the outset, the Republic of Cyprus has been a fragile experiment, as we said, one seemingly destined to fail and lead to the island's eventual division. There you see the 3 proposals, how to split the island between the two communities. From 1964 to 1974, little changed. The two communities remained entrenched in their positions, with tensions deepening over time. The Republic of Cyprus had limited or no authority in these several areas controlled by the Turkish Cypriot enclaves, while mistrust and hostility between the communities persisted. In many ways, the events of 1974 were the culmination of this decade-long deadlock, the final act in a conflict that had been simmering for years. I will not dwell too much on the tragic events of 1974 as we covered them in detail last year. However, a brief chronological overview is essential to understand how the situation on the island developed. And while I'm doing this, you will watch some of the contemporary videos of that time. The military, just after that, the military junta in Greece, the colonels, took power on April 21st, 1967. Creating a tense and hostile climate between Greece and Cyprus, particularly towards the administration of President Makarios III. The junta sought enosis, their old dream, the union of Cyprus with Greece, which had already been impossible since Cyprus was now an independent state. They blamed Makarios for this outcome and decided to stage a coup d'etat. At the same time, the newly formed Cyprus National Guard was being trained and directed by Greek officers sent from Athens under prior agreements, so junta was already inside Cyprus. Let's start with the chronological details, what actually happened. July 15th, 1974, the coup in Cyprus. The Cyprus National Guard and the Greek officers loyal to the junta carries out a coup against President Makarios III. The presidential palace in Nicosia is attacked and bombed. Makarios escapes under fire to the west part of the island, Paphos, and later flees to London via Malta and from there to New York. Nikos Samson, a hardline nationalist and journalist, is installed as a fake president. The coup declares that Cyprus will move towards enosis. July 16th, 1974. Crisis and reactions. Turkey, as a guarantor power under the 1960 Treaty of Guarantee, announces it cannot accept the coup and begins military preparations. Greece junta refuses to back down. Britain calls for restraint but does not intervene militarily. Makarios addresses the UN Security Council in New York on July 19th, denouncing the coup as a Greek invasion. July 20th, 1974. Turkish invasion begins. Operation Attila I. At 5 a.m., Turkey lands troops near Kyrenia, north coast, and paratroopers near Nicosia, the capital. Turkey claims a peace operation under the Treaty of Guarantee, citing protection of the Turkish Cypriot community. Heavy fighting erupts between Turkish forces, the Cypriot National Guard, and Greek units. The UN Security Council demands an immediate ceasefire, according to the Resolution 353. July 22nd, 1974, first ceasefire. A ceasefire is declared after 3 days of fighting. Turkey controls a small bridgehead around Kyrenia and parts of northern Nicosia. Thousands of Greek Cypriots flee north, while Turkish Cypriots move towards Turkish-controlled zones. July 23rd, 1974. Let me play this again for you. Collapse of the Greek junta. The Greek military dictatorship falls under pressure from the Cyprus crisis. Konstantinos Karamanlis returns from exile in Paris to form a civilian government. Nikos Samson, the puppet president, resigns, and Glafkos Kliridis becomes acting president in Cyprus. July 25th to 30th, 1974. First round of Geneva peace talks. Greece, Turkey, and Britain meet in Geneva. They agree Cyprus should remain independent, with Turkish Cypriots granted administrative autonomy in areas they inhabit. Talks end without a firm settlement. Tensions remain high. August 8th to 14th, 1974. Second round of Geneva talks. Turkey demands a federal state with control over 34% of the island. Greece and Cyprus reject this. The next day, August 14th, 1974, second Turkish offensive, Operation Attila II. Turkish launches a large-scale invasion rapidly advancing. Turkish forces capture Morphu, Famagusta, and Carpassia, all the north and east part of the island. Thousands of Greek Cypriots are displaced while Turkish Cypriots move north. Roughly 37% of Cyprus falls under Turkish control. August 16th, 1974. Final ceasefire and division. A final ceasefire is declared, freezing the situation along what became the Green Line. UNFICYP, the United Nations force, begins patrolling the buffer zone. So what you see here, 25 days were enough. In the aftermath of the 1974 events, around 180,000 Greek Cypriots fled or were expelled from the north, while approximately 45,000 Turkish Cypriots relocated to the north. What is essential for our discussion today is that Turkey, invoking the role of the guarantor powers, you remember it was established in 1955 by Britain, something we have traced all the way back there, invaded under the pretext of restoring the Cypriot constitution and protecting the Turkish Cypriot community. In reality, Turkey captured a significant portion of the island, despite the original agreements making clear that the guarantor powers were responsible for defending the Republic of Cyprus and its sovereignty over its lands. The months following the division focused on restoration and survival. President Makarios returned to the island in December 1974, prioritizing support for the refugees from the north and investigating the fate of hundreds of Greek Cypriots war prisoners transferred by Turkey to Turkey. Meanwhile, the northern part of the island became entirely dependent on Turkey, with Turkish troops permanently stationed there. Relations between the Republic of Cyprus and Greece remained deeply strained after the coup by the colonels, leaving Cyprus to face the immediate challenges largely on its own. As Prime Minister Konstantinos Karamanlis noted, unfortunately, Cyprus was geographically and politically distant from the motherland, and the government had to struggle independently to restore stability and pursue unification. In 1975, the United Nations initiated talks between the two communities, which led to the first official meetings in 1977, 3 years after the events, between President Makarios and the new leader of the Turkish Cypriot community, the young lawyer Rauf Denktaş. These discussions focused on possible solutions, but no substantial progress was achieved. After the death of Makarios, in August 1977, there were some signs of advancement. President Spyros Kyprianou and Rauf Denktaş met in 1979 at the Green Line, the border dividing the north and the south, under UN auspices, along with representatives from Greece and Turkey. For the first time, discussions considered the establishment of a common government spanning both communities, aiming to unify the island. Although no solution was emerged, these meetings laid the groundwork for future negotiations. So this is how the very sad decade of 1970 ended up for Cyprus. Only 25 days, as we saw, was enough to divide the island, cause all these problems. And now, although we had some negotiations, nothing was stable, nothing was certain. In the following years, and I'm talking about in the 1980s, minor talks continued under UN facilitation in Nicosia and Geneva, yet progress remained limited. A significant complication occurred in November 1983, when Turkish Cypriot leaders unilaterally declared the independence of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, recognized by Turkey to this day. And on the picture, you can see actually the flag of the fake, as we call it, pseudo Republic, Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Is the same like the Turkish one, but the reverse colors. So instead of red at the back is white and vice versa. This declaration effectively solidified the status quo in the north, complicating subsequent peace talks. Meanwhile, the Republic of Cyprus has repeatedly maintained its position at the United Nations, recognizing the northern part of the island as occupied territory, preserving the principle of sovereignty over its entire territory. From the period following 1974 and onwards, there were some positive developments for the Republic of Cyprus at mainly two levels. First, the relationships with Greece greatly improved. A notable moment came when the then Greek Prime Minister Andreas Papandreou declared that if Turkey attempts to move to the Cypriot south, that will mean directly war between Greece and Turkey. reinforcing the Greek sentiment on the island and demonstrating strong support for the Republic of Cyprus. More importantly, the second major initiative began in the early 1990s with the prospect of Cyprus joining the European Union. Under the presidencies of George Vasiliou and Glafkos Cleridis, EU membership was seen as the most effective means to secure the island's safety, preventing further expansionist moves by Ankara and protecting the Republic of Cyprus. While European efforts began in 1990, a full application portfolio for Cyprus' EU candidacy was submitted in 1993. However, obstacles emerged almost immediately. Turkey warned the EU that accepting Cyprus would be considered a hostile act, and four key EU members, the Big Four as they call them, UK, France, Italy, and the Netherlands, argued that Cyprus could only join the EU after a solution to the Cypriot problem and the unification of the island, citing concerns about the rights of the guarantor powers. It was during that period, early 1990s, the UN, the United Nations Secretary General Boutros Ghali, proposed the first comprehensive framework for a potential solution, the Ghali framework, Ithesis Ghali, based on the previous 1979 negotiations. For the first time in 1990s, we are talking about a bizonal, bicommunal federation, which was suggested, in which Greek Cypriots will live in the south, Turkish Cypriots in the north, but a federal government similar to the United States will govern the entire island. The proposal ultimately failed due to the territorial disputes, particularly over areas such as Amorphos and Famagusta, which the Turkish Cypriots were unwilling to cede. Throughout the 1990s, intercommunal talks continued, mainly in Nicosia and Geneva, Switzerland, a neutral area, with little substantive progress. However, the Republic of Cyprus achieved a critical diplomatic victory in its external policy. That was separating the EU accession process from the unresolved Cypriot problem. Greece, as a key EU member, played a decisive role in persuading other EU countries to accept Cyprus as a full member while leaving the path open for future negotiations on reunification of the island. So it's totally two different issues. Meanwhile, despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, tensions on the island remain high, particularly along the UN-controlled buffer zone, the so-called Green Line. This demarcation, which cuts directly through Nicosia, became not only a physical boundary, but also a symbolic one, reflecting decades of mistrust and trauma. Violent incidents were not uncommon, and tragically, many young soldiers lost their lives in confrontations that yield no political gain. The summer, for example, of 1996, and I'm having some pictures there, and I apologize for the raw content, marked one of the most painful episodes when Greek Cypriot demonstrator Tassos Isaac, the guy on the left, was beaten to death during a protest near Derinia, the Green Line, followed just days later by the fatal shooting of his cousin Solomon Solomon on the right, as he attempted to climb a flagpole to remove a Turkish flag. These deaths, widely publicized internationally, underscored the depth of polarization and the human cost of the ongoing division, reminding both communities that the stalemate was not only diplomatic, but profoundly personal. However, let's go to the good news. On May 1st, 2004, the Republic of Cyprus officially joined the EU, alongside 9 other countries, including Poland and Czech Republic. Although the northern part of the island remained under the control of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, EU law is legally, even today, applicable to the entire island. It's different if it's being enforced or not, effectively affirming the Republic of Cyprus' sovereignty over the north. EU membership was viewed as a transformative step, offering a potential framework and leverage for a future resolution of the Cyprus problem. Here we go. During the same period, especially between 2002 and 2004, while Cyprus was negotiating its accessions to the European Union, the United Nations was actively working on a new solution to the Cypriot problem, one that appeared more viable than any previous attempts. This plan, named after the United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, became famously known as the Annan Plan, το σχέδιο Annan. And I have to talk personally here. I remember it vividly. I was 18 years old that time. And I remember that in supermarkets, coffee shops, in streets everywhere, people were arguing and discussing, shall we accept it or not? Say yes or no? Because as we see further down, in order to move forward, there was going to be a referendum and people was going to vote for ne or όχι. Let's see what that plan was actually offering to understand why yes or why no. The Annan plan built upon the earlier, what we mentioned, Gali framework of the early 1990s, but added important refinements closely tied to the Cyprus EU accession. After extensive negotiations at Burgenstock in 2003, a final plan was prepared. The proposal envisioned a bicommunal federation with a federal government rotating leadership between the two communities. Each constituent state will have its own parliament and president, similar to the structure of the for US state governor, president. The federal government will operate under a new name, the United Republic of Cyprus, with a new constitution and a new flag incorporating 4 colors: yellow, white, red, and blue, what you see there. Crucially, Turkish and Greek troops will be replaced by an international force tasked with implementing the agreement, at least during the initial years. The UN planned for the referendum to take place just 1 week before Cyprus' formal accession to the European Union, hoping the island's long-standing division could be resolved just before its integration into the European family. So Cyprus going to the European Union on May 1st, 2004. The referendum took place on April 24th, just 1 week earlier. However, at the last moment, several uncertainties caused concern, particularly among Greek Cypriots. The plan did not clearly specify the timeline for Turkish troops, for example, withdrawal. It required the existing Republic of Cyprus to dissolve before being replaced by the new state. And it did not guarantee that Greek Cypriot refugees would be able to return to their homes in the north. As the referendum approached in late April 2004, tensions ran high. Most political parties took, to be honest, a neutral stance, urging citizens to vote according to their consciousness. The notable exception was President Tassos Papadopoulos. I remember vividly that evening of April 7th, when all primetime TV programs were interrupted by his live address from the presidential palace over approximately 50 minutes, and where he calmly but firmly explained the plan, concluding by the following, and also I'm going to listen 2 minutes of the last part of his statement, and you can see his emotion. So Papadopoulos said, taking all the facts into account with calmness and objectivity, but also with full awareness of the historical significance of the moment and the weight of the responsibility that falls upon me and that you have entrusted to me, I sincerely regret that I cannot accept or sign the Annan plan as it has ultimately been formulated. I received an internationally recognized state. I will not hand over a community without internationally recognized rights and in search of a guardian. Now allow me to show you President Papadopoulos. Can you hear his voice or no? No. Let me work on this. I'm so sorry for that. Let me fix this. Yeah, go.
Ένα κράτος διεθνώς αναγνωρισμένο. Δεν θα παραδώσω κοινότητα χωρίς δικαίωμα λόγου διεθνώς και σε αναζήτηση κοινεμόνα. Και όλα αυτά έναντι κενών, παραπλανητικών, δίθεν προσδοκιών, έναντι της ανεδαφικής ψευδαίσθησης ότι η Τουρκία θα τηρήσει τις δεσμεύσεις της. Συμπατριώτες, στις 24 Απριλίου θα τοποθετείτε με ένα ναι ή ένα όχι στο σχέδιο έναν. Θα αποφασίσετε για το παρόν και το μέλλον της Κύπρου, για τη γενιά μας, αλλά και τις γενιές που θα έρθουν μετά από μας. Έχω εμπιστοσύνη στην κρίση σας. Είμαι βέβαιος ότι δεν σας αγγίζουν ψεύτικα διλήμματα, ότι δεν σας τρομάζουν απειλές για δίθεν διεθνή απομόνωση, ότι δεν σας πείθουν τα περί δίθεν τελευταίας ευκαιρίες. Είμαι βέβαιος ότι εξακολουθούν να έχουν για σας νόημα οι ηθικές αρχές και αξίες του λαού μας, του πολιτισμού και του εθνικού ιστορικού μας βίου, τον οποίο θέλετε να συνεχίσουμε με ασφάλεια, δικαιοσύνη, ελευθερία και ειρήνη. Ελληνική Κυπρέγγελα, στη ζυγαριά του ναι και του όχι, πολύ βαρύτερες και πολύ πιο επαχθείς θα είναι οι συνέπειες του ναι. Σε καλώ να απορρίψεις το σχέδιο ανάπτυξης. Σε καλώ να πεις στις 24 του Απριλίου ένα δυνατό όχι. Σε καλώ να υπερασπιστείς το δίκαιο, την αξιοπρέπεια και την ιστορία σου.
In the referendum, 76% of Greek Cypriots rejected the plan, while 65% of Turkish Cypriots supported it. Although Cyprus formally became a member of the EU on May 1st, one more opportunity to resolve the Cyprus problem was lost. Negotiations between the two communities stalled for the following 4 to 5 years. And there you can see what was showing in the newspapers. I remember it, say no to the Annan plan and if something will happen. One development from the negotiations surrounding the Annan plan that remains in effect today was the opening of the borders along the Green Line. On April 23, 2003, the first checkpoint was opened, connecting the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot communities for the first time in 29 years. Since then, 3 additional checkpoints have opened, further expanding the connection between the north and south, mainly benefiting the Turkish Cypriot community. It is important to understand that until then, the Turkish Cypriot community was largely isolated with a fragile economy and almost no communication with the outside world except through Turkey. The opening of the checkpoints changed this dramatically. Thousands of Greek Cypriots crossed into the north, some to visit the homes and lands of their forefathers, others to purchase goods such as tires or fuel at lower prices, or even to enjoy casinos and entertainment. However, the unique legal status of the Turkish Cypriot North as an unrecognized entity outside the scope of international law meant that certain illegal activities and misconduct could not be effectively controlled. Notably, even today, some of Europe's most wanted criminals have reportedly found safe haven there without interference from local authorities. As a result of this opening of these 4 checkpoints has significantly improved the standard of living for the Turkish Cypriot side. While this development was a positive step in terms of mobility and economic opportunity, it has also created a new challenge. The improved situation in the north can make future negotiations for a comprehensive solution more complex, as the Turkish Cypriot community may be less willing to compromise now. Only after 2008 did the new negotiations and approaches emerge under the auspices of the new United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, eventually gaining real momentum in 2011. The period from 2011 to 2017 was perhaps the most critical since the Annan Plan. These negotiations brought the parties closer than ever before to a potential solution, culminating in the Crans-Montana talks in Switzerland. During this cycle, the 3 sides, the Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, and the UN, carefully studied the mistakes of the Annan Plan and sought to avoid repeating them. As in previous efforts, the goal was to establish a bizonal, bicommunal federation, but a major innovation was an attempt to finally resolve the long-standing issue of the guarantor powers. Through numerous meetings in Nicosia, Zurich, Geneva, and Montpellier from 2011 to 2016, negotiations progressed steadily. Ambiguities from the Annan Plan were clarified, the status of the new state was carefully adjusted, and the 2 communities approached agreement on nearly all issues. A key positive factor was also the constructive relationship between the Greek Cypriot President Nikos Anastasiadis and the Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akiji. What you see there, the 2 guys. Akiji, in fact, had sometimes challenged Turkey's positions in pursuit of a solution, a sign of unprecedented flexibility of the Turkish Cypriot side. The final phase of this initiative took place in early July 2017 in Crans-Montana, where 2 main tables were set. One was for the 2 Cypriot communities finalizing the agreement, and one for the guarantor powers represented by the foreign ministers of Greece, Kyrios Kotsias, Turkey, Çavuşoğlu, and the UK, along with a UN representative. Unverified reports suggest that Greece proposed that Cyprus, as a full EU member, needed no external guarantors, and that all 3 powers should withdraw. Turkey and the UK reportedly agreed. Everything seemed ready for a historic breakthrough. On the evening of July 6th, during the final dinner, Greek and Greek Cypriot delegations sat on one side of the table, Turkish and Turkish Cypriot delegations on the other, with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in the middle. Guterres reportedly toasted the near agreement, noting that even the guarantor powers had agreed to leave the island, allowing the Cypriots to determine their own future. And we're talking about at 8 p.m., 8:30 p.m. now, on July 6th. However, that moment, during the toast, the Turkish Foreign Minister, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, interrupted to clarify that Turkey had never agreed to leave the island. Guterres apologized for the misunderstanding, but this triggered a marathon negotiations that lasted until 3 a.m., during which parties argued over critical issues such as the number of Turkish troops on the island. The Greek Cypriot side advocating the 1960 constitutional limit of 650 Turkish soldiers, while Turkey demanded at least 1,200. By around 3:30 to 4 a.m., The United Nations Secretary General and representatives of both communities announced to the media that the negotiations had failed. Despite coming closer than ever to resolution since 1974, the Cyprus problem remained unsolved. The Crans-Montana talks, arguably the only negotiations to reach the level of progress, were effectively torpedoed by Turkey's positions, not those of the Turkish Cypriots, demonstrating a recurring pattern. When Turkey perceives a loss of control, it blocks the process entirely. Following the failure, Turkish and Turkish Cypriot officials took a hardline stance, asserting that the only solution will now be two independent states on the island with no connection between them. Here I have a small video about Gutierrez that he was announcing it, and I can show you later because the lack of time, and I can send you the link. You can find it easily on YouTube when Gutierrez is saying that everything is failed. It has now been more than 8 years since the failure of the Crans-Montana negotiations, and progress has remained stalled. Following that setback, the flexible Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akinci lost the elections, and the conservative Ersin Tatar, a close ally of Turkey, was elected, effectively severing bridges with the South. Yet, I would like to close this presentation on a note of hope. What you see there is on October 19th to 2025, just a couple of weeks ago. There were elections at the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which they brought a new ray of optimism. Tufan Erkurman was elected as the new leader in the north. Seen as more open to new ideas, he may help bring the communities closer to a meaningful solution. A week ago, President of Cyprus Nikos Christodoulidis reached out to Erkurman, and both leaders agreed that negotiations should resume, raising the possibility that, at long last, a lasting solution to Cyprus' problem may be within reach. In conclusion, the story of Cyprus teaches several enduring lessons. First, the Cypriot problem is deeply intertwined with both internal political structures and external geopolitical interests. Efforts to achieve a lasting solution cannot succeed without addressing the legitimate concerns of both communities, while simultaneously mitigating the influence of external guarantor powers. Second, progress requires patience, persistence, and willingness to compromise, lessons painfully learned during the failures of the Gali framework, the Annan Plan, and the Crans-Montana. Third, the resilience of the Cypriot people, their ability to endure displacement, political instability, and economical hardship remains a cornerstone of hope. Despite decades of separation and tension, initiatives such as the Green Line crossing demonstrate that trust and interaction can be rebuilt, albeit gradually. As we reflect on the historical arc from 1960 to the present, it is clear that the Cyprus problem is not merely a political dispute, but a complex tapestry of history, identity, and international law. Yet history also shows that moments of opportunity arise, often unexpectedly, when leadership, vision, and circumstances align. The recent developments in 2025 may represent precisely such a moment. A chance to resume dialogue, reconcile differences, and pursue a solution that honors both communities' rights, aspirations, and dignity. In closing, the Cyprus problem remains unresolved, yet hope endures. The resilience of the Cypriot people, the lessons of history, and the willingness of new leadership to engage in dialogue offer a path forward. If pursued with commitment and wisdom, this path could finally lead to the reunification of the island, securing a peaceful, stable, and prosperous future for all Cypriots, a goal that has eluded generations but remains even within reach. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Yes, if I may. This is Labros Pilalis from Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, the same community as Father Michael. Dr. Petrou, thank you very much for your detailed presentation and update. My question, actually, I want to give you an opportunity to provide a couple of comments on modern geopolitics. The other event, as we all know, in 2004 which is not advertised very much, is the fact that the independent Cyprus Republic, lacking an air force and lacking a navy, did declare the exclusive economic zone under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. And of course, in 2010, Noble Energy discovered the exploitable undersea natural gas deposits in the Cyprus area. And of course, we know about the delimitation agreements with Egypt, Israel, and hopefully others. In terms of modern geopolitics, this has essentially introduced a new alignment in the region between Cyprus, Greece, Egypt, and Israel. Would you like to comment on that, please?
I am 100% on board with you. You're absolutely right. And it's something that actually needs a totally new presentation. The geopolitical new strategies and the new alignments with our new allies in the area are so important and so positive for the evolution of the Greek Cypriot problem. However, I try to focus on the future of the people and what happened, how the people of Cyprus endured this. You're absolutely right. All these other developments in the area played a significant role, a tremendous role to the, how can I say, the establishment of the new agreements and from an unplanned, from the arranging their AOs and all these different economical zones, going even forward, coming now with Israel, even the games, the geopolitical games and situations in the Middle East, they are directly affecting Cyprus 100%. However, it's something like I wish I had more time to focus on that and talk about these external relationships of Cyprus. I tried to be more internal, to focus on the communities and the relationships, to talk about them, to understand the problems between the two communities as people, as persons, as societies. But yeah, hopefully in the future, we'll have the opportunity to talk more about these geopolitical strategies and these developments and see in a broader eye all these new things happening in the area. Thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you.
Just if possible, I would like to also touch on the immigrants from Anatolia, Turkey, that came to the northern Cyprus. Is any talk how many, what the population is? And I'm hearing that the Turkish, Cypriot Turkish people are not very fond of the immigrant Turkish in the northern part of Cyprus.
That's so true. And it's a big aspect that it should actually needs even more detailed research, meaning that the number is, if you search the real sources, and we don't know how many they are still, and they are increasing rapidly. According to the Crans-Montana recent agreements and the plan, even from an unplanned, it was actually to put a plafond, a limit, to have a certain number of limiting the Anatolian immigrants to the north in order to keep the balance. Imagine that from the 80%, what we talk of the Greek Cypriot population and the 18 Turkish Cypriot, now we are approximately 60-40, or maybe 65 to 35. The population is very rising, but we have to understand also and the big divisive and conflict between the Turkish Cypriot society among these different groups. In the recent elections, when we have the new leader of the community, one of his promises was actually to limit the incomes of the new arrivals. And why this is a big issue also in our case, in the problem of Cyprus, is like a small part of the international law, according to the agreements of Crans-Montana, where Mavroyannis, our Greek Cypriot diplomat, was discussing. It has to do with the memory of the generation. What that means? It means that according to the memory of the generation, the people that want to go to the north, they will be able to go to their places, and the people that are already there, They have to move out and go to other locations. So imagine that the people that live those times, they are dying. So the new generation that came from Anatolia is building roots. And so the new people, the youngsters in the north part, they are now consider themselves as Greek Cypriots and effectively European Union citizens. Imagine that all these people there, they are getting their IDs, their passports from the Republic of Cyprus. They are traveling to European Union or to other countries because the Turkish Republic of North Cyprus is blocked by any international flights. They are coming to the south part with their provided by the Republic of Cyprus passports. They're going around the world. Or even in some cases, we are providing electricity and water to the north and to these communities, which actually are Anatolian immigrants, which is something that the solution has to be found as soon as possible because the number is increasing dramatically. And what is the idea is to stop it hopefully to 200,000, and it's approximately there. Hopefully we can find a plan that we can relocate all these people or distribute it eventually when the solution will come. But yeah, as we mentioned, the Cypriot problem is so complicated and it can be a bit tricky.
Thank you.
Professor Petrou,
Please.
when you were talking about the intercommunal relations, and I was privileged to have traveled to Cyprus in 2005, my understanding is that, especially under applicable European Union law and also Republic of Cyprus law, the Republic of Cyprus is very observant of the property rights of the Turkish Cypriots who migrated into the Turkish-occupied area. I'm sorry, I'm not going to use North Cyprus here. I use the Turkish-occupied term.
So true.
And the example that immediately came to us personally was that, for example, the privately owned university, what is now University of Nicosia, could not even expand in another one of the cities because the property that they were looking for essentially was owned by a Turkish Cypriot who had migrated to the occupied zone. At the same time, of course, we have time and again litigation of, unfortunately, European Union citizens, British, German, but especially British, who are taking over properties that unlawfully are being sold in the occupied sector and essentially are sold by the authorities there, and then recourse must be taken, to the international courts, the European Union courts, so on and so forth. Is there any mechanism at this point that the two communities will, on their own, will try to attempt to resolve, this particular issue? And I appreciate your comment that now you have the Turkish, Anatolian migrants who are born there, and essentially from a humane, viewpoint, you cannot very well tell them, okay, now you're going to become the new refugee, or you have to return back to Turkey. So what are the negotiations or mechanisms that are attempting to address this particular issue among the communities without external, involvement or interference?
I think, Mr. Lambert, you touched a very sensitive chord. And actually, this was one of the two main points that they couldn't find the solution at the Crans-Montana, which has to do about the movements between the two communities if this solution will prevail. And that was a big worry from the Greek Cypriot community. And the Turkish Cypriot community, there was about safety and security. But from let's approach the Greek side, the Greek Cypriot perspective of the specific topic is that in the Republic of Cyprus, there's a very complex and detailed mechanism that was inherited by the British Empire about κτηματολογία or ownership,
Sure.
knowing everything, details, whom belongs to whom. And everything is being preserved as they left it. They know that, for example, when the refugees came after 1974, they relocate them into Turkish Cypriot houses, let's say, in various areas. For example, in Paphos, in Mutalos, there is a big neighborhood that was actually belonged to Turkish Cypriots, and they relocate the refugees there, but they know they don't own any ownership titles. They know that these houses belong to Turkish Cypriots, that eventually, hopefully, when the solution will come, maybe they want to come back and can take them back. However, the north part, they don't have this kind of mechanism. They just take advantage of everything, and not from general perspectives and pictures we know, just see our churches in the north part. It's terrible. Cemeteries. I mean, very recently, 2 decades ago, we managed to reclaim the mosaics from the Kanakaria church, which actually they looted. One of the few examples. I mean, they just took advantage of everything because that's how it worked there. And unfortunately, there is no solution about this. They didn't solve the specific point, and also one of the conflict points that led to the disruption and to the dead end of the whole conversation. But the hope, what I saw recently by Nikos Christodoulidis, our new president, our president in Cyprus, is like he's hoping that he can collaborate with the new leader of the Turkish community, Erhurman, that they can find a solution about this, restore some of the properties, manage to exchange some populations, hoping that there is a solution at the dead end. But yes, you're absolutely right. The South takes very good care of this. They know every detail. The North, unfortunately, no. It's simple that, no.
May I say a couple of words here? Can you hear me?
Your Eminence, please.
Yes. I want to thank you for your wonderful presentation. I won't be able to stay on for much longer, but I'm grateful once again that we have a record of it so that we can return to it on YouTube, because you prepare so well, and your illustrations and the video and photos and maps are so to the point and helpful. I simply want to speak to express my gratitude on behalf of everyone who participated today and those who will be listening in the future, that you gave us this very helpful primer, as it were, for an understanding of the current situation. And I want to thank the previous questioners because they asked my questions. But I want to simply ask, let's strike the word simply, because it doesn't apply to the situation. But you didn't mention anything about the role of the religions of the regions, how the church, what the church understands its role to be, or what kind of an agenda it promotes, and whether the North is perceived to be particularly rigorous in its adherence to Islam, and kind of a secondary second part of that is, what about the generational attitudes? Do the younger people still take, especially those who travel freely up and back and forth and go to casinos and the like, are they so committed to the specifics of previous generations, or are they open to a less kind of fearful approach?
Your Eminence, these are two good points, and I suggest maybe in a future time we can discuss about the history of Cyprus, which is so important. You're absolutely right, meaning that not just we discussed it the last time, but coming until today, the Church of Cyprus is considering that there is no change to the status quo. We still have our metropolitans and our eminences, and our structures are based to the Byzantine style. Imagine that, because there is a long tradition. However, there's this new arrival in the north that imagine that one of the biggest mosques in the Middle East it has been built in the north part, unfortunately, because all these things are happening and all these new arrivals from Anatolia are coming and establishing um, a new
But are they
status.
pious? Are they pious? Are they, do they have a religious character? Are there more mosques being built and then is mosque attendance, regular?
The people from Anatolia, yes, they are much more, I would say, it, fanatics.
Okay.
And they are much what you saw there, for example, the case of Tassos Isaac and
Mhm.
Solomos Solomou, the two demonstrators that were killed during the events of 1996 and various
Mhm.
other events were happened afterwards. It was well known that during these demonstrations, when they know there's a demonstration going to happen, at least this is talking also from a personal experience,
Mhm.
the north side is bringing buses of the famous grey wolves, Grizzly.
Yes,
It's
right.
like
Okay. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
fanatic Anatolians, which are very to Islam and they're ready to kill for anything. So
Yeah.
yes, there is a huge sentiment about this, and I have to state this just to give you an idea. On the Green Line, when I was 18 years old, I was also compulsory to serve. I was very proud to serve to the Cypriot and Greek army for two and
Mhm.
a half years, and I was being there on the Green Line. On the Green Line, imagine that in some cases there is a distance between a few meters and others kilometers.
Mhm.
You can shout to them, they can listen to you, and vice versa.
Mhm.
You can communicate with them, etc. And because there was at some periods a more communication between the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots, they changed all the army on the Green Line and brought army from Anatolia. So to be
Mhm.
more fanatics and more absolute against the Greek Cypriot side. And to this, I
Okay.
have to add is something like always, I should state this, I'm not sure where this fits, but for example, in the middle, we have the UNs, the
Mhm.
UN forces. The UN has always their trenches and their sandbags towards the Greek side,
Yeah.
never towards the Turkish side. It's like we are the enemy. In the second part, you mentioned about the new generations going to the north.
Mhm.
It's sad, but it's something we still use it, and it's becoming a bit cliche that the people tend to forget, and the
Mhm.
new generations are tending to forget very fast, especially people that were born after 2000. And imagine now they are 25 years old. They're the new generation. All these 1974 for them sounds like World War II.
Yeah.
And their grandfathers or their grandparents that were refugees, they died even before they were born. So they never
Yeah.
knew their house. So unfortunately, something like what we mentioned before, the memory law that we have to solve this as soon as possible before the last of the refugees will die. So we have at least some pressure points. At least we should not decide, okay, take the half of it, I will take the other half of it, and it's done. Because slowly, we are leading to the things that I don't know the North, I don't want the North. It's a bit
Right.
sad.
Exactly.
It's a bit sad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I for one will have to leave now. If others want to stick around to talk, let's, feel free. But I simply wanted to say once again how grateful I am for your contribution, and grateful as well that you're willing to let us disseminate this on our platforms. Okay.
Yominas, the pleasure and so on is all mine, and I look forward to our future conversations.
No, well, again, thank you, and maybe someday we'll meet.
For
Uh,
sure.
we have to stop meeting like this. Okay, be well. God bless, and I look forward to that.
Ευλογείτε.
Okay, good night.
Professor, I know you're working overtime right now, but we thank you for your presentation, and there's many layers to this. It's just a complex situation right now. And it's sad, but like you said, there's hope. And we know with everyone's prayers and on Ayan God, you know, we know many miracles can happen, so we don't know what. So, but I want to thank you so very much again for your excellent presentation. I want to thank everyone that participated tonight. Yeah, the questions were excellent.
I want to thank you about this, and allow me to say this, that not just the conversation, the comments by Mr. Lambros, by Father Michael, but His Eminence are so important, and I wish we had so much more time to talk and solve the Cypriot problem by ourselves. But it's something like I hope that sometime we can do it in person with a Cypriot coffee, as we call this, a Greek Turkish coffee. But in our version, and we can sit down like human beings, like what Cyprus need right now, discuss all these difficulties, discuss all these matters, and finally, that's how we solve problems, by understanding, listening, and talking.
Yes. Well, again, I thank all of you, and especially Professor and Father Michael. Could you say a closing prayer for us?
Yes, Maria. Again, I'd like to also say thank you to Professor Elias Petrou for really a beautiful presentation. A lot of different things are happening. Even I have heard that some pieces of the iconostasis of a church from the north was sold somewhere in Japan. I said, what?
Yep.
It's amazing what is happening. But thank you very much. Who knows? Maybe in the future we can have a presentation close in St. Nicholas in Pittsburgh, or our hall here in Camp Hill, and have people understand the situation, and maybe, I don't know, what in the old days there were demonstrations here to the United Nations to do something, and now a good opportunity, as you mentioned, with Erkuman and Christodoulidis. Who knows? Maybe the Lord bless all these initiatives. O Christ, the true light, who does enlighten and sanctify every man that comes into the world, let the light of your countenance be shined upon us, that in it we may behold the unapproachable light, and guide our steps in the performance of your commandments by the intercession of your all immaculate Mother of all your saints. Amen. Good night. God bless and be with you, and thank you again.
Hello, brother.
Καλή σας.
Night.